And we will give it just a minute for any attendees that were waiting to pop in. Okay, all right. Let's get started, shall we? Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here today. And for those of you that are watching online afterwards, thank you so much. I am Gretchen Butler. I'm here as a volunteer for Arts Vote ATL. We've been organizing a series of forums for our district council, our city council candidates, and we are today in the post 3 at-large spot. So we're going to hear from some of our candidates. I want to thank Jody Maraday, Jackie Labatt, and Keisha Sean Waits for being with us today. And I want to thank and introduce our moderator. So Amir Faroki, thank you so much for doing this. Amir is a native of Metro Atlanta. He lives in the Old Fourth Ward and is the council person for District 2, which is where the theater where I work sits. And we are all big fans of Amir's. He's a graduate of Duke University. And one of the reasons that everybody in the arts loves Amir is in 2018, he led the charge to double arts funding at the city level from 1 million to 2 million. And we have seen direct benefits from that. And are grateful every day. And I think it's fair to say he still has a kind of new baby at home. So we're appreciative of you and your work and your service, and appreciative of all of you that run for office. So with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Amir, and we look forward to hearing from the candidates.
Thank you, Gretchen, and good to be with everyone on this call. And I know a number of folks may be watching this as a recording. So welcome, and thank you for caring about arts and culture in our city, especially as it relates to the post 3 at-large race. To the candidates on this call, I look forward to working with one of you, but it really, if you're running for office, you're going to be impacting the city, whether you win or lose, for many years to come. And so I look forward to working with you in whatever capacity the future holds, but appreciate all of you taking the time to be part of this conversation today. It's really important. What I'd like to do is, we'll dive into some questions in a minute, but at the start, I'd like for you to just introduce yourself, 30 seconds or so. But as part of that introduction, if you could tell us what artist, could be a performer, could be living, could be dead, could be a sculptor, doesn't matter. Any sort of, whatever you define as artist, what artist has most impacted your life? And just introduce yourself to the audience. So we'll go with Keisha, Jackie, then Jody. And I will say this, I said this offline before we started. Running for office it's both a sprint and a marathon at the same time. And I know folks are exhausted. We're 3 weeks away from election day. And right now it feels like 5 years away for folks, because it's a grind. So I hope you're all doing well and taking care of yourselves and still standing. It'll be over before you know it, as slow as it feels like it's going right now. But I just want to say thank you for running. It makes our city better. So Keisha, Jackie, and then Jody, just introduce yourself and what artist has most impacted your life.
So yes, I am Keisha Sean Waits. I am a native, like my colleagues, of Atlanta. I certainly am excited about how our arts community is growing in Atlanta. I'm thrilled by that. I've had the pleasure of spending 19 years serving at the local, state, and federal levels of government. I actually interned for the city of Atlanta in 1994 following college, so that was a lot of fun. But essentially, I spent the last 15 years serving an emergency manager, so I know something about crisis management and solving problems. I also had the amazing privilege of serving 3 terms in the Georgia House of Representatives, where I believe those relationships will be critical to navigating some of the challenges that you have in the city, specifically given the airport takeover and most recently, the dynamic in terms of, the public safety, property taxes issues in terms of capping taxes for legacy residents as well as seniors. So I think we've got some very serious issues. And then we've got Buckhead wanting to break off. The artist that I would say had probably the greatest impact that I'm most fond of would probably be Prince. When I look at his legacy in terms of his music, certainly it's timeless, and I will stop there in lieu of time. Thanks.
Thank you, Keisha. The the Prince Atlanta Connect was his last performances in Atlanta before he passed away, amongst many other connections. But I think we all hold Prince in high esteem. Jackie, over to you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just go ahead and start with that. Prince is absolutely the artist that had the biggest impact on me because I grew up with posters of him on my wall. Some of y'all know that I grew up in Southwest Atlanta. My dad was the operations manager at the Omni and Atlanta Fulton County Stadium for many years. So I grew up in front of big, big speakers with my ears blown out, like at the end of the night. And I want to say Prince, Michael Jackson, the Bee Gees, Elton John, seeing them perform just live and in person, whether we were up close and in person or not, it was just so mesmerizing and inspiring. But I was able to see Prince at that last concert, and I saw him in person, and he immediately went from a romantic kind of idol to a very talented musician. He was just this little strange person. And I was like, oh, I never really could have dated him. But I say that to say I am an Atlanta native. And I love Atlanta, grew up in Southwest, went to Atlanta Public Schools and also Fulton County Schools, graduated from Hampton University, Hampton in Virginia, HBCU, came back, worked in corporate America with a lot of our leading executives in Atlanta and also Coretta Scott King before I started my own small business. I kind of stumbled into public service as married to the chief of City of Corrections. And I worked with a lot of the employees over there at the city, just in terms of resume building, youth engagement, youth enrichment. It was really an empowering experience, and it showed me something that I did not know, which was the awesome responsibility that I had and also the impact that I could have on their lives and also the lives of others. So when this opportunity presented itself, that I felt Atlanta was at a pivotal juncture. We are at a really, really interesting turn. Everyone's up in arms about a variety of issues, and it became apparent to me that I could really serve in a very meaningful way. So I look forward to tonight and would love to have your support.
Thank you, Jackie. Jody, you're on.
Yes, good evening. My name is Jody Meriday. I am a Southwest Atlanta native and APS graduate, parent and former employee, product of the HBCU experience. I attended Hampton University, but I matriculated from there to culminate my doctorate in African American Studies. My body of work intellectually is in correlation to the arts quite strongly. I did the first piece of work on women in hip hop as my dissertation, Hip Hop, Her Story. I'm passionate about the arts as I am an artist activist. I've been culminating bodies of work in art probably for about the past 40 years. I started in elementary school, but my most recent works have been making certain that I curate the narrative of the activists and the artists who are performers in jazz, Billie Holiday, Nina Simone, Abby Lincoln, and beyond. I'm on the board for STEAM Revolution, wherein what we really focus on is science, technology, engineering, arts, and all of the other facets beyond that are traditionally overlooked when we're thinking about STEM. So STEAM Revolution is a very important part of my service. And lastly, most impactful artist, I would say Nina Simone. I think often it is lost that artists create the artifacts and the memoirs of the moments that mean the most to us. For me, as a vocal performance jazz artist, Nina Simone's legacy of service, civil rights, and pioneering some cutting edge content, I think is unprecedented. And so for that reason, I'm happy to be here with the community that I love, that has nurtured and sustained and allowed me the opportunity to fully express myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. I think you said it well. In many ways, the arts and culture community of any city, but especially ours, reflects our hopes, our dreams, our aspirations, our anxieties. They help us self-reflect. They help us remember, and whether that's in live performance format or a still installation, it runs the gamut, and it creates a level place. It connects us to one another. But even with all that and all the different modes of arts and culture that exist in our city, whether it's film, whether it's music, whether it's painting, whether it's graphic design, whatever it may be, a street festival, it's a very significant part of our economy. It is a $605 million industry in Atlanta. And these arts and cultural organizations that exist in that ecosystem spend $1 million in their expenditures, which goes into our economy and helps employ folks and support other businesses. And yet, despite all that, our city lags significantly in the amount of public support it lends to the arts and culture community. And it's not only the city's responsibility, some of this falls on the county and the state as well. But when you look at our peer cities, Charlotte, Nashville, some of the closest, but also around the country, Chicago, DC, Detroit, et cetera, our public support for the arts pales in comparison. We spend about $2 million a year to our Office of Cultural Affairs. A good bit of that goes to arts and cultural organizations. But other cities, including those in the region, are at 5, 10, 15 million, and others are closer to 50 million in bigger cities around the country. And so from a funding perspective, that's not the only way the city can support the arts, but from a funding perspective, we lag. And I would like to just open up with the first question. We'll go in reverse order. We'll go from Jody to Jackie to Keisha this time around. How do we solve the funding? I won't say gap, but just the lack of public funding that goes to arts and cultural organizations. I will note about 15 years ago, the city published a cultural plan, of which we haven't had one since. And at that time, under Mayor Franklin, the recommendation was the city, and this was in 2006, the recommendation was the city should be putting in $10 million a year to help fund arts and cultural org. So I'll stop there, and we'll start with Jackie. Talk a little bit about how do we address the low funding we have for the arts and nonprofit orgs in our city.
Are we going backwards with Jody, or did you want to start with Jackie?
No, we're starting with Jody. Sorry if I misspoke, but Jody,
Oh,
Jackie, then
okay.
Keisha.
No problem. Sure. I very much supported Mayor Franklin's vision at that juncture where the recommendation was 10 million, and believe when we're looking at 2025 in terms of a trajectory that it will need to be about 20 million to activate and cultivate the talent and infrastructure that we have available here in our city. A part of the magnetism of Atlanta has been arts and culture, like our global brand. And many of the artists that have had an incredible impact, including the likes of Outkast or Goody Mob or Radcliffe Orville Bailey, like some of our locals, Fahamu Peku, like our vocal jazz arts like Russell Gunn. I mean, keeping those people on the map and being thoughtful about the impact of theater, the visual arts and beyond globally necessitates that we think about a $20 million trajectory. And I think your question is really like, so how do we fund it with finite resources that are going to be allocated from the municipality? And I think it's really writing grants. And I think it's also leaning in on the private sector and our corporate community to ask for them to endow and to raise and to support how we fulfill a mission for the arts. I wrote the grant to the Rockefeller Foundation for the city of Atlanta to get Atlanta a chief service officer and be recognized as a city of service. As a council person, similarly, I think I would look at resources from different foundations and nonprofit orgs to see how Atlanta can acquire those funds and move forward with ensuring that we are robustly supporting and developing not only an arts district, but on a secondary level, ensuring that we are nurturing all of the facets of the arts, from music to theater to video, television, and beyond. I think you're muted, Amir. We can't hear you.
Yeah, thank you. I said thank you, Jody. I appreciate that. And Jackie, we'll turn to you now and talk a little bit about how we might go about increasing the amount of public funding we have going to arts and cultural organizations.
Thank you so much. And I hope you guys can hear me. You see, I'm trying to get this in while on the way somewhere else. I hope I don't lose y'all. I think that we do need to leverage our corporate partners in this regard. I think that when it comes to the arts, it's always been sort of last on the list, first to get cut. And with the budget opportunities that we have going into this new fiscal year, where you look at other shortfalls, I think everybody is lagging, right? So this is kind of a time for us to level set. I think we do need to look at allocating dedicated dollars year over year. I think $1 to $2 million if that is correct, I'd have to look at the budget and study it, is just very light. I think that I've heard people talk about 12 to 14 million being adequate. It's probably a larger number than that, because when you look at COVID and you look at our schools and you look at where our kids are going to need that support, when it comes to music, and I did ballet for 12 years, I was governor's honors and chorus, and those were the outlets that I looked forward to the most. Even though I was a 4.0 student, I looked forward to the days we went to the Alliance Theater and Woodruff Arts Center and to see plays and that sort of thing. So I think it's just important for our kids' overall growth and mental health that as a city, we partner with our school system, we partner with our corporate partners, and make sure that funds are allocated to ensure we have robust arts going forward. And I look forward to speaking with our community stakeholders to figure out how we do that.
Thank you, Jackie. Keisha, floor is yours.
Sure. One of the reasons that the film industry is thriving here in the state of Georgia is because the state did something really, really well, and that is they incentivized the industry, right? And so I'm really happy with that direction, but I think we can go a step further here on the local level. So for that reason, I support a special use tax, and I know that everybody in Atlanta is being taxed to death. So I'm not talking about any property taxes, but in fact, what I'm referencing is a special use tax, such as a recreational tax. Other cities have done this well. I don't believe that anyone would have a problem with us putting a $1 fee on any arts related event, whether you're the Woodruff Center, the Arts Theater, any of those types of venues, to raise funds to do some of the things that we're talking about doing. So want us to support a recreational special use tax. And I also would like to see some of the incentives that the state has done at that level, us do that on the more of a local level for nonprofits and organizations who do work specific to that industry. So I think that that's two ways that we can generate some funds. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. Those were all fantastic answers that I think reflect your depth of knowledge and thought on this issue. So I appreciate you all sharing your responses and thinking on that. Some things I hadn't thought of, so I appreciate your innovation and thinking. Related to this issue of funding, one of the challenges that we've seen, and this is not specific to Atlanta, this is true across most of the country, is equity in how funds are distributed, both to the types of organizations and individuals that may receive funding, but also to the types of neighborhoods that may or may not have access to cultural and artistic offerings. And I represent a district, frankly, with a lot of richness when it comes to arts and culture. Part of that's just it's the center city, so you have a lot of established entities. You have a lot of smaller theaters that exist and have been here for a while. And so there's a lot of stuff that just naturally happens in my district. But there are other neighborhoods and parts of the city that may not have as much cultural opportunity to get out and experience, whether they're artists or street festivals, whatever it may be. As well as organizations that frankly get looked over in the funding process. Some of them may be women run, some of them may be Black run, some of them may be just small and new to the scene. And so I think my question that I'm getting at here is, how do we address inequities in funding, and who should lead those efforts as we approach how our city prioritizes and make sure that the nonprofit arts and culture community gets funding. Why don't we do this? We'll go Jackie, Keisha, Jody.
Okay. Thank you for that question. And I think that in talking about equity and disbursement of funding, you have to be able to educate those without all of the ancillary people on their staff who do those things for them. You need to be able to have a portal. You need to be able to have technological advances and maybe give them some leeway on some of the red tape involved on that process. I think that we should also partner with our stakeholders in this community who are the experts. I'm a supporter of folks from the community, our corporate sector, the arts and so forth, who are experts coming in to advise those who are elected, but I don't think they should come in to hold any type of responsibility for getting it done, because that's what we've been elected to do. So I think that we do need some type of advisory council to talk through best practices. And COVID has really hampered community input. And you end up with hours and hours of some type of impersonal communication. But I think over time, we have to get to a point where we're
reestablishing the lines of communication as to what the communities are lacking, what they want, and how we can best serve.
Thank you, Jackie. Keisha?
Sure. I think one perfect example is the Variety Playhouse in Little Five Points, or 5 Points, I think. And what I love about it is that they're small venues and they're opened up to individuals who simply can't afford places like Phipps Arena and the Mercedes-Benz Stadium and so forth. So they're small, intimate venues. And I think that those are perfect for the smaller nonprofits and individuals who may not have access to resource or volume, right? And given all of the land that the city of Atlanta owns, and I'm referencing buildings that are underutilized as well as unused, that we can turn this space over to smaller nonprofits who just don't have the funding to pay rent or to rent out these particular spaces. And I think that this will be a wonderful way to bring all of these communities under one umbrella and for the city to really lead on this issue. So I'd like to see us take some of our buildings and some of the space that we own and that is underutilized, and also to do this in some of the areas. I can think of several buildings right here in District 12 that are not being utilized. The old health center, for example, in Lakewood, I think would be a wonderful place to do some of this work. And so I particularly love these forums because we get to exchange amazing ideas, and hopefully whomever is successful, we can all partner together to put some of this stuff in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Keisha. Jody?
I think it's about proportional representation when you're querying how do we get those who are disengaged engaged, and how do we ensure that all of the communities that we would be representing are included, funded, visible, and have access to the resources. And I just think it's proportionality. I think we've got to look at equity throughout our city and look at proportioning resources for assurances to be in place that each community is having that opportunity for that cultivation of what its possibilities are artistically. I have loved the mural projects that have been emerging all over the city. I think it's just a beautiful way to pay homage and to provide testimony in regards to the things that different artists have contributed, and as well as leaders have contributed. And so when I think about the underserved and the opportunity even for creative expression, extracurricular engagement, points of passion work, et cetera, I just think we've got to look at equity. When we acquire and are able to distribute and really reflect on what this vision looks like, and when we have that $20 million in hand that I think we need, I think then we should begin to look at north, south, east, and west of our city, where we place those resources, ensuring that there's visibility in all communities and that each community's resourced. And I hope, again, to my colleague's point, that we don't miss opportunities for placing these resources in underutilized places like our recreation centers, like some of our centers that we own, or our facilities that we own, like even I'm thinking creatively, like we just haven't, even in terms of Atlanta Public Schools, used some of the connectivity to resources and buildings that we could if we were stewarding a good partnership with them.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jody. I've been remarkably impressed with all your answers today. This has been a really, really good set of responses. So I appreciate, again, the thoughtfulness you guys have expressed. One of the things I learned in my first term was that arts and culture policy, a lot of it, particularly the funding of nonprofits and the Jazz Festival, comes out of our Office of Cultural Affairs, but a number of other city departments also engage in arts and culture work, whether it's installation of public art, whether it's permitting performances in our parks, whatever it may be. And I think you see separate policy in our different city department buckets, even though Office of Film and Television sits in the mayor's office and has its own set of processes and thinking. How would you, this is on me too. I mean, I sit on the city council, but how would you think about maybe better aligning or coordinating our city's arts and culture work? And we'll go Jody, Jackie, Keisha.
Starting with me, aligning departments. I think that the key word in that question is collaboration and vision. I think we have to start where we want to end, with a collaborative vision of everyone that needs to be seated at that table to ensure that we are delivering what we envisioned delivering. I think we often make decisions and operate in a way where we're not including each other, like my department, your department, that department only does those things. And then we don't correlate or integrate departments and engage everyone that should be engaged. I think people have also been a little territorial, when they land in the space that they feel as if they have the most knowledge of or the most expertise about, they then don't necessarily think about collectively, well, what could be my value if I'm working in coordination or collaboration with others. I think the Jazz Festival is a good example of an opportunity that we could utilize in terms of integrating arts and capturing more of that integration process by way of what gets executed. I've participated in the Jazz Festival, but it's never been that you've got jazz meeting theater or film in terms of that festival, maybe even for the capture of the bodies of work, or maybe there being live art for the visualization of the work and the creation of bodies of work therein. But I just think the key word is collaboration. We've got to collaborate. We've got to communicate better. We've got to be inclusive and not departmentalize. This is my new word, departmentalize versus compartmentalize. We can't departmentalize a broad-based vision that we know not only is incredibly lucrative for our city, but is an integral part of the soul of our city and what makes the heart of Atlanta really beat.
Thank you, Jody. Jackie.
Yes, okay, great question. So as you talk about going into basically a new administration, I think there's so much opportunity there where we can look at where there have been a duplication of efforts, where there may have been a contradiction of efforts, where things have not been streamlined, but where you do have some opportunity to fold in and kind of restructure under a new head what our mission and our values and our goals are as a city, and then make sure that all of the departments are working in alignment. I do think that, like I said, this is a huge opportunity for us to touch not only our corporate partners in terms of support financially, but in public schools and making sure that in new creative ways, we're bringing kids in and exposing them to the arts. Some kids, I've talked about having kids shadow in a corporate and vocational setting because these kids just may need a trade or may be interested in something that's not they want shadow just arts center, and they just may have that underlying talent in their belly. But I think that together, all of those departments within the city need to be working for a unified mission. That would be my goal.
Thank you, Jackie. Keisha?
Sure. So oftentimes we focus a lot on what the city gets wrong, but very rarely do we talk about the things that we get right. So under Mayor Shirley Franklin's administration, I recall a lot of the artwork being presented throughout the airport. I think that was a brilliant opportunity to showcase local artists to folks from around the world. I love that. Secondly, in the City Hall building, I have seen them feature various artists throughout our city, which I thought was a very successful way for underfunded artists to get their information out there. So I think that's brilliant. I also like some things that the High Museum has done in terms of creative use of their space. The Georgia Aquarium, I think that's lovely. Folks are now getting married at an actual aquarium. So I think that there's a lot of creative things we can do. My colleague earlier hit on the facts that we could utilize schools. So the schools in the local area are a great opportunity to showcase the talent right there in those individual districts. We can use our libraries to do the same thing, as well as city buildings that are owned by the city. So what I'd like to see is for all property that we possibly bring it online for local artists who may not have the funds of some of the larger, more recognized artists. So we use these venues to showcase that talent. Thank you.
Thank you, Keisha. We have not had a public cultural plan, an arts and cultural plan, since 2006. So we're going on 15 years. There's been some internal work done here and there, but nothing that really has been a kind of public deep dive on what role the city should be playing on arts and culture, what does success look like. What do we need to be doing internally across departments to integrate arts and culture? And so I guess my question to you is a simple one. How do we get something like that done in the next few years if you're elected? And I'll work on it with you, but something we need to into. How do we get that done? And let's go Keisha, Jody, Jackie. You're on mute, Keisha.
Okay, you broke up a little bit. The question one more time.
Yeah, sure. We haven't had a cultural plan for the city in 15 years. How do we get it done in the next 3 or 4 years?
Okay, great. So I'm pretty sure that there are individuals who lead on this conversation. I'm not one of those folks, so I don't know the answer to that. But I will tell you this, for the stakeholders who are a part of that community, I'm pretty sure that they have some ideas regarding that dynamic. As I said earlier, I would simply start at the very local level from the districts, and that is utilizing nonprofits who do this work every day. The council, in terms of individuals who host the Atlanta Jazz Festival, those types of individuals who do this every single day is where I would start.
Jody.
Yeah, so I think where we start is with the establishment of the arts district, getting a localized place and space where people know, can land, can meet, and can envision. I think we have to expand cultural affairs in terms of its resources as a department. For a long time, fond memories of Camille Love there and doing that work, but more people and more resources need to be availed to that office so that when we're looking at the interdepartmental collaborations, that there are more boots on the ground, capable, able, prepared, and funded to do so. I think we have to engage the private sector, find about 5 leaders that are strong in Atlanta Committee for Progress or Committee for a Better Atlanta, have them commit to $1 million each in terms of raising funds and deliver those funds more specifically to some of the deliverables that the plan would envision. And then lastly, in terms of collaborative partnerships, the youth engagement model has got to be partnered with Atlanta Public Schools. I think if I look at it and I kind of give it a quarter, like a pie chart, a quarter of it has to be around what we're cultivating in schools with STEAM. I think very often art is the final frontier for people who want to express all kinds of emotions. The socio-emotional behavioral component in APS, I think, would be well spent or well envisioned if what we're thinking about is allowing students to have that creative outlet through extracurricular and curricular engagement. So I think the cultural plan has to be multifaceted. It's got to be interdepartmental collaborative. It's got to be well funded, and we've got to expand that Bureau of Cultural Affairs. And then we've just got to be good partners to artists, seat them at the table, hear from their voices what they think will best enable them to flourish and shine.
Thank you, Jody. Jackie?
Yes, thank you. I guess this is where my project management hat comes in. So for me, I would start with your last question, look at our department that we have in terms of cultural affairs. I would look at other departments across the city and put together our framework in terms of staffing and who we will have to primarily be responsible for targeting and addressing formulation of this plan. And then obviously we've got to go back to a prior question and make sure that we have proper funding in place, because as I tell my kids all the time, my budget is not your budget. So you can spend based on what's in your budget, and you can build a plan based off of what money you have. And I think over time we may be able to grow that, but the plan has to be commensurate and it has to be short-term and long-term. And then thirdly, I would go out to some of our sister cities and just see what's working, what's been innovative, thinking outside the box, what hasn't worked, and then engage our community stakeholders in the arts here to build and implement the right plan.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. I want to welcome Ralph Long, another candidate for the Post 3 at Large position. Ralph, welcome.
Thank you, Amir. How you doing?
I'm well. So we're drawing toward the end, but I do want to, what I'd like to do here, I'm going to ask you one question, Ralph, that others have already answered.
Sure.
And then I'll circle back for a couple rapid fire questions to kind of start to close this out. But in your answer to this question, if you want to maybe introduce yourself, anything you want to say, just to kind of let the audience know who you are and why you're running. But the question I'm going to pose to you is one I asked about 15 minutes ago. which is, we lag most other peer cities, almost all peer cities, in the amount of public funding we provide to the arts and culture community. We spend about $2 million a year for our Office of Cultural Affairs. About 1.2, 1.4 million or so goes into organizations from that. Nashville, Charlotte are 5 and 10, 15, 20 million. How do we go about increasing funding for our arts and culture community in the next few years? And Ralph, that's for you, and then we'll circle back to everybody else.
Well, I can tell you right now, you elect me. That's how you do that. I have a bachelor's of interior design from the Art Institute of Atlanta. I was that kid that cut school in the art room. All the paintings that you see in my home, I painted. The drawings back here I've drawn. I could want to take you on a tour, kind of like, but I guess I could, because I'm sorry for being late too. I apologize to this body for being late, but we're preparing to go to this event dinner. But I am art. This is my piece right here. I love art. I've done so many pieces throughout my house. Art is what made me, art kept me out of trouble. Art kept me focused. When my parents went through a divorce, it was art that I turned to keep me from really, this piece right here too as well, getting off track. Art saved my life. The focus, the discipline of art, the discipline of having to sit down and to draw kept me as a young man from off the streets doing bad stuff. And that's my picture house of mine on Catherwood. I have an extreme portfolio of art. I tour the Hyde Museum of Art all the time. I welcome SCAD universities into the city of Atlanta. I'm just really glad to have a platform where I can be a benefit to the art community. And if you guys can't hear me, I unplugged my mic to walk around, but I'll put it back up.
We can hear you.
So, yeah, so I'm Ralph Long. I'm a former, and I'm headed to a dinner, so I do apologize for being late to you guys and being unsettled. I'm a former state representative. I served in the General Assembly for 4 years. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I live on Peyton Road in Southwest Atlanta. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to run and to follow in the footsteps of my Aunt Carolyn, who was the first Black woman in City Council, and many other greats in my family. And I know our council member's mother here. She's, I'm following her footsteps too, because she was an awesome, awesome young lady. Arts, the art program and art in our community really saved lives. Art is more powerful than what you think. When I'm depressed, I can get on my piano. Other kids have lost themselves in the arts, and it keeps them focused. It keeps them into one spot. It keeps them, it soothes their wounds when you're depressed. At least it did for me. Art really expanded my mind. It taught me patience. And whenever there's a time to benefit or support art, I'm there. I love all the art projects and things that were on the Beltline. Look at how the Beltline would be just another trail if there wasn't something, every incremental step to attune the eye to an art piece from a particular artist. It would be just another path through what would now be overgrown reeds, because it does need some maintenance. So I can tell you that's what art means to me. Art to me means life. And it's hard I'm not just saying that because I'm pandering for some votes, but when your parents go through a nasty divorce and you're about to flunk out of school and you find solace in your pencil, your hummingbird pencil, number 2, and just drawing pencils. And when you've committed yourself to drawing each cobblestone of a mansion or something that you're going to paint or something, you can soothe and heal the wounds of your heart by getting in depth and focus on art in that way. And I hate to sound so deep with it, but that's what art means for me. Art means a refuge, a place to hide, a place to come out and reveal what your inner creativity can bring and produce, and it's beautiful. And that's whenever there's funding for art, I'm there. Whenever there's an opportunity to fight for artwork or to increase art's ability. I think it's just as important as math and English. I think it's a fundamental core curriculum that needs to have a little bit more respect, I would say. Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you, Ralph, and thank you for the tour.
Thank you. No
That was
problem.
a nice addition and a wrinkle to I think we've all gotten tired.
We're all in each other's home. You guys are guests in my home right now.
I want to finish with I want to finish with two questions.
Yes.
They will require shorter answers. Ralph, you touched on this a little bit, but I'm gonna start with we'll go Jackie, Keisha, Jody, Ralph for this one. And that is, how do you define arts and culture? Whether from a policy perspective or in your heart, how do you define arts and culture? Start with you, Jackie.
I think arts and culture is really about creating your inner being. It's an expression outwardly, but you are what you absorb as well. I have a friend who is a child psychologist, and she's been working a lot with kids during the pandemic because they've really sunk into this real depression. And whether they're having to learn online, they need help, their mom's online, they can't get the help, they try to get the teacher, they've been quarantined, now they've got to come home. One of the things that I found very interesting that I would like to incorporate in the Youth Empowerment Summit that I am going to be pioneering again in the spring is this study on working with kids and their music and what you are listening to. And it literally does make a difference in terms of, just kind of your environment and what you pour into your soul. So I think that in Atlanta, we have an opportunity to be a leader in that space and to really provide an aesthetically pleasing, calming environment and prioritize the arts in a way that will move the city forward in conjunction with all the other priorities that we have right now. But it's a real opportunity.
Perfect. Thank you. Keisha.
You're muted.
The thing that I really appreciate about the arts community is that we live in a world where we are probably politically and culturally divided. And the wonderful thing about arts and athletics and all of those things, that seems to be the common thread that kind of brings us all together. There's this intersectionality that I believe occurs that is necessary for healing, specifically in the times of COVID, in the times of the pandemic, even following 9/11. And so I would say to you that I think that this is the one area where we can all come on one accord. And I think that there's some level of equity there, whether you are a person that's visually impaired, whether you are someone that has any type of other mobility limitations, certainly your talent will flourish. And what I want to leave you with is that when we talk about policy, and you use the term cultural policy in terms of setting policy for the arts cultural policy, you can't write policy that's going to change people's hearts and minds. But I do believe that we can elect people who have the compassion necessary to change people's hearts and minds. And I think ultimately we are having a conversation about simply will and what direction we want to take our city in and what we ultimately want it to look like. I've been inspired by a lot of the murals all over the city, from the north side of town to the south side of town. And my colleague earlier stated that they tell a story, and we get to tell that story. And so I'm happy to be a part of that conversation. And it is my hope that with all of the ideas that have been discussed tonight, Councilman, that you will put some of this legislation in place before we get downtown and start the clock rolling.
Perfect. Thank you, Keisha. Jody, what does arts and culture mean to you?
Arts. So arts is literally the artifacts, the tangential expressions of the artist by way of their mediums. And culture is our lived experience. And I think, I love when the young people say for the culture. It's like a phrase that is used to really just, put their best foot forward in reference to what they think represents them. And I think in the culture and in the artifacts, what we are hearing about our city and the direction in which the city is going from the visual arts community to the performance poetry to the live performance to film. We've got a ways to go as a city. I love the opportunity to listen by way of the artifact as a culture, and from there be thoughtful about, as someone who's seeking to serve a constituent base citywide, what does that reflect back to us and say about the direction in which we need to go? So for me, arts and culture are the pulse. They're the tone, they're the tune, they're the momentum, and they are the path, not only in reference to what we can know about our past, but in terms of what we can envision for our future.
Thank you, Jody. Ralph, in a bridge version, what does arts and culture mean for you? And then we'll wrap up with one final rapid fire question.
Arts and culture is the tapestry of Atlanta. It sets everything, the mood. It sells Atlanta. That's the appeal of Atlanta, why people want to come here, from the majesty of our trees to our music. Look what Outkast, Andre 3000, 2000, whatever, and our music industry has done for Atlanta, and the High Museum of Art. You can also learn your history in art. So art is the fabric, the tapestry, the filaments, of what binds and sets the mood of Atlanta, and what makes Atlanta so great. And I think it's one reason that Atlanta has all the Fortune 500 companies that it does, because there's something to do here, and we take advantage of every ounce of sunlight that we get, and we get a lot. That's why Atlanta's great. Arts is what makes Atlanta amazing.
Thank you, Ralph. All right, last question, and then everyone can get to their gala, their door knocking, their emails, their dinner, whatever it is you got to do next. I know you're all running on fumes. What is your favorite Atlanta cultural event or artist? It could be a person, could be an event, could be a space. What is your favorite Atlanta arts and culture person, event, or moment? And we'll go, let's go Jackie, Jody, Ralph, finish with Keisha.
Okay, so like I said, growing up in the Omni and Atlanta Phone County Stadium, it could go on, but there are two events that used to happen pretty regularly, annually almost, that I look forward to and really shaped me as a child. And one is Alvin Ailey, having danced ballet for so many years. I used to love going there to the Fox. And the other was Annie. That was absolutely the best stage play, musical, just every single thing of it. I mean, I felt it. And I was so happy to see that they had a little Black Annie years later, which I never even thought as a little girl could be a thing. But that just goes to show that these things are so impactful for kids. But both of those made my day whenever we would go.
Thank you, Jackie. Jody.
Yes. So my artist, unequivocally, Outkast. It was just like, when I think about Aquemini or Elevators, everything that they narrate is it reflects to me very much so a lived experience, what it meant to be in the SWATs, what it meant to be growing up at the time when Outkast was really making its mark. Second, in terms of an event, I have to come really contemporary as the phone rings. Pardon. Geez, who else has a landline but me, right? I'm sorry. The second was about a festival or an event. And so for my festival event, it would be One Music Fest. I just think that One Music Fest as a contemporary event brings some of the best and the brightest talent into the city. I'm really proud of Jay Carter, the amount of investment that he's made into that event, the kind of highlight that it brings to the southernmost part of our nation, because people come from everywhere to attend that event. And I just remember it's indicative of how small we start and how large things can become if we really put our mind, our energy, and our efforts in the right direction.
Wonderful. Ralph, and then we'll finish with Keisha.
Jazz Festival, on Outkast. I'm gonna Riding the Pink Pig, and the Macy's Christmas tree. I miss those. Those are my favorite events, and we're losing our That's why I'm fighting for the soul of of Atlanta. We're losing those key components, and we got to keep them going. But thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Terrific. Keisha.
So for me, these two events take place at the same time. I am a huge fan of Dragon Con. I remember seeing a guy dressed up like, I can't think of his name. He's in Game of Thrones, the big guy. So it was amazing. I mean, he looked exactly like the guy I wanted to ask for his autograph. And then of course, Atlanta Pride. I've been going to Pride since I was 18 years of age. And so, even though it's been moved around a little bit, so those were two of the more fun times. And so that's where we get to certainly have a conversation surrounding public safety and Piedmont Park, which is another day, another conversation. But nonetheless, those are probably the two events that I think have been the most funnest events for me. Dragon Con coming online a lot later in life. And there are also two huge revenue generators for our city. And so, again, those are other opportunities where we can certainly showcase our talent here in the city. And so thank you again for the hosting, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Yeah, thank each of you. Those responses, I think, really reflect the tapestry of arts and culture in the city. Obviously, it's even bigger than that, but I love the diversity of responses there, from big world-class performances to local homegrown artists to street festivals to a big event at the Omni. I'm actually old enough to remember going to stuff at the Omni. It's really, really good to hear those reflections. So a big thank you to Keisha, Jackie, Jody, and Ralph. I'll turn it back over to Gretchen. Thank you for letting me host this
Thank
conversation.
you.
Look forward to working with all of you.
Thank
Yes.
y'all.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you to
y'all.
all the candidates who are here tonight. Amir, thank you. Fantastic job. So on behalf of all of us at Arts Vote ATL, for anyone who's watching now or watching later on the recording, regardless of what you think about any person, vote. Make a plan, get out there and vote. These local elections are hugely important in the way they impact all of our lives here in Atlanta. And these fine candidates, thank you all for the time and passion that you put into civic service, because without people like you, our city would not be the great city that it is. So best of luck, and we will see you all on the flip side. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.